The first time I drove Mrs. Eleanor, she gave me a $5 bill for a coffee and told me I had a kind face. The third time, she asked me to take a small detour down a dirt road to see a house she grew up in. When I hesitated, the sweet old lady in my passenger seat looked at me, her smile gone, and said in a voice I didn't recognize, "Don't make me ask you again." My heart did a little stutter step in my chest, a frantic bird beating against my ribs. The change was so sudden, so out of character for the frail, lavender-scented woman who had, until that moment, been nothing but a font of grandmotherly charm. But I'm getting ahead of myself. It's important you understand how it started, how normal it all felt, so you can see how easily a frog gets boiled. I'd graduated college 6 months earlier with a degree in social work and a mountain of debt. The job market was brutal, a soul-crushing cycle of online applications and polite rejection emails. To keep from spiraling into a full-blown existential crisis, I decided to do something useful, something that would make me feel less like a drain on society. That's how I found Helping Wheels, a local charity that provided non-emergency medical transport for seniors. It sounded perfect. I had a reliable, if slightly beat-up, Honda Civic, a clean driving record, and a genuine, bleeding heart desire to help. My mom always said my empathy was my best and worst quality, that I'd give the shirt off my back to a stranger and then wonder why I was cold. The orientation was exactly what you'd expect. A stuffy community center room with stale coffee and a PowerPoint presentation about liability waivers and maintaining professional boundaries. I was the youngest person there by about 30 years. They assigned me my first regular client a week later, Eleanor Ainsworth. The file described her as a 78-year-old widow with moderate arthritis and no local family, needing rides to various medical appointments. Simple enough. Our first trip was to a physical therapist across town. Eleanor was waiting on her porch swing, a tiny woman swallowed by a floral print dress. Her white hair was a soft, wispy cloud around a face etched with a lifetime of wrinkles. She smelled of old books and peppermint. "You must be Chloe," she chirped, her voice as delicate as antique lace. "Oh, you have such a kind face. A truly kind face." She offered me a warm, freshly baked oatmeal raisin cookie before we even got in the car. I was completely charmed. The whole drive, she regaled me with stories about her late husband, Frank, a supposed war hero, and her grandchildren in Oregon who were always just about to visit. She was lonely, obviously, but sweet. I felt a surge of purpose. This was why I'd signed up. I was helping. The second ride, a week later, was for a routine checkup. More stories, another cookie. She asked about my life, my studies, my non-existent love life. She listened with rapt attention, making me feel like the most interesting 24-year-old on the planet. She pat my hand at red lights, a gesture so maternal it made me ache for the grandmother I'd lost a few years prior. She was knitting me a scarf, she announced, in a lovely shade of blue to match my eyes. I felt a little bubble of warmth expand in my chest. I wasn't just a volunteer, I was making a connection. I was her friend. Then came the third trip. The destination in the system was Westside Cardiology. It was a 30-minute drive. The sun was shining, Eleanor was humming along to the classic rock station I had on, and everything felt normal. We were about 10 minutes from the clinic when she suddenly said, "Chloe, dear, could you take the next right?" I glanced over. We were in a semi-industrial area, all warehouses and chain-link fences. "The clinic is straight ahead, Eleanor," I said gently. "I know, dear," she said, her voice still light and airy. "But there's a little road up here, a dirt one. The house I grew up in is down there. It's been so long since I've seen it. Just a small detour, it won't take a minute." A warning bell, faint but clear, chimed in the back of my mind. The Helping Wheels handbook had been explicit: no unauthorized stops, no personal errands. Stick to the assigned route. I don't know, Eleanor, I started, trying to find a polite way to refuse. We have to be at your appointment on time, and the rules are pretty strict. That's when it happened. The change. It was like a mask slipping. The gentle, grandmotherly facade dissolved, and something cold and hard took its place. Her back straightened. The hand that had been resting peacefully in her lap curled into a tight, white-knuckled fist. She turned her head slowly, and her pale blue eyes, usually so soft and milky, were suddenly sharp and clear as ice chips. "Don't make me ask you again," she said. The voice was low, guttural, and laced with an authority that was utterly terrifying. It didn't belong to the frail old woman I thought I knew. I looked from her face to the upcoming turn, the dusty, uninviting dirt road disappearing into a thicket of overgrown trees. My foot hovered over the brake. Every instinct I had was screaming, but my ingrained need to please, to be the kind face she praised, was at war with my fear. My throat went dry. The silence in the car was suddenly thick and heavy, pressing in on me. I could hear the tick-tick-tick of the turn signal I'd instinctively flicked on. My mind was racing, trying to process the disconnect between the sweet old lady and the cold command she'd just issued. Was this a joke? Was she having a senior moment, a flash of dementia-fueled anger? That had to be it. I was a social work major, for crying out loud. I'd read about this. Confusion, agitation, it was all part of the territory when dealing with the elderly. I took a breath, trying to steady my nerves. "Okay, Eleanor," I said, my voice coming out a little shaky. "A quick look. But then we really have to get to the cardiologist." The moment I agreed, the mask slipped right back into place. The icy glare melted away, replaced by a beatific smile. "Oh, thank you, dear girl," she cooed, patting my hand again. The gesture now felt less like affection and more like a leash being gently tugged. I made the turn. The Honda's tires crunched on the gravel, kicking up a cloud of red dust. The road was barely a road at all, more like two ruts carved through a dense wood. Branches scraped against the car windows with a sound like fingernails on a chalkboard. It was dark under the canopy of trees, even though it was a bright afternoon. We drove for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 3 or 4 minutes. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel. Finally, the road opened into a small, dilapidated clearing. In the center stood the shell of a house. It wasn't just old, it was ruined. The roof had caved in, windows were shattered, and the whole structure sagged like a tired old man. A rusted-out pickup truck, its tires long since rotted away, was being slowly consumed by weeds nearby. "Here it is," Eleanor whispered, a strange, wistful look on her face. "This is where you grew up?" I asked, my voice barely audible. It looked like the set of a horror movie. "Oh, yes," she said, though her eyes were scanning the tree line, not the house. "Many happy memories." The air felt wrong. Prickly. The kind of quiet that isn't peaceful, the kind that feels like it's holding its breath. I felt like we were being watched. "We should go," I said, my voice firmer this time. "Your appointment." She didn't argue. As I executed a clumsy three-point turn, my headlights swept across the edge of the woods, and for a split second, I thought I saw something or someone, a tall, broad figure standing just behind a thick oak tree. I blinked, and it was gone. It must have been a trick of the light, a shadow. It had to be. We were, of course, late for her appointment. When we pulled up to the address for Westside Cardiology, it was a boarded-up building with a for-lease sign in the dusty window. "Oh, dear me," Eleanor said, feigning confusion. "They must have moved." "My mistake." She didn't seem upset, just mildly inconvenienced. On the drive back to her house, she was quiet, humming that same tune from earlier. The incident on the dirt road was never mentioned. I dropped her off, and she gave me another cookie, but I couldn't bring myself to eat it. I threw it out the window as soon as I was down the street. That night, I couldn't sleep. The image of that derelict house and the fleeting shape in the woods played on a loop in my head. The next week, I considered calling the Helping Wheels coordinator and asking to be reassigned. But what would I say? The sweet old lady I drive was a little cranky and took me to see her creepy old house. I'd sound like a paranoid idiot. Besides, a huge part of me felt guilty. What if she really was just a lonely, confused old woman? Abandoning her felt cruel. My empathy won out. I decided to give it one more try, but this time, I'd be firm. No detours. The next appointment was at Oak Valley Dental. I looked it up beforehand. It was a real place, which was a relief. But the drive there was tense. Eleanor started talking about her son. She'd never mentioned a son before, only the grandchildren in Oregon. My boy, he's a good boy, she said, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. Just misunderstood. He lives nearby, you know. He worries about his old mother. The way she said it sent a shiver down my spine. It wasn't a proud mother's boast, it sounded almost like a warning. Then came the possessiveness. She started asking me questions that felt way too personal. Was I seeing anyone? Did I live alone? When I gave vague answers, she'd push. A pretty girl like you shouldn't be all by herself. It's not safe. Then, the fits of rage became more frequent. One time, I missed a turn because I was focused on the GPS. Her reaction was instantaneous and terrifying. Are you stupid? She shrieked, her voice cracking with fury. Can't you follow a simple instruction? I was so shocked I nearly swerved into the next lane. 2 seconds later, she was crying, actual tears streaming down her wrinkled cheeks. I'm so sorry, Chloe, dear. I don't know what comes over me. My nerves are just shot. It was emotional whiplash, and it was clearly manipulative. She was testing me, pushing my boundaries bit by bit. The final straw, the thing that made me realize this wasn't dementia, that this was something else entirely, happened a few days later. We were heading to a podiatrist appointment. She asked me to stop at a pharmacy so she could pick up a prescription. Again, against the rules, but I was so desperate to avoid a fight that I agreed. While she was inside, her phone, an old flip phone, buzzed in the pocket of the purse she'd left on the seat. The screen lit up. It was a text message. I know I shouldn't have looked, but I couldn't help it. The sender was just listed as S. The message read, "Is it her? Does she look right? Is it her? Does she look right?" The words on the small screen seemed to burn into my retina. My blood ran cold. It was a single sentence, but it was loaded with a context so sinister I could feel the hair on my arms stand up. Her? Right for what? This wasn't a son checking on his mother. This was an appraisal. An evaluation. I was being vetted. Suddenly, all the weirdness, all the red flags I had been painstakingly explaining away, clicked into a horrifying new picture. The non-existent appointments were a ruse to test my compliance. The visits to isolated, derelict locations weren't nostalgic trips, they were scouting missions. The probing questions about my life, my living situation, it was all information gathering. And Eleanor, the sweet, frail old woman, was the bait. My heart was hammering against my ribs so hard I thought it might break through. I wanted to start the car and peel out of that pharmacy parking lot, leave her there, and never look back. But her purse was still on the seat. My phone was in its cradle on the dash, but who would I call? The police? To tell them what? That an old lady's son sent a weird text. They'd think I was crazy. The Helping Wheels coordinator? It was Saturday. She wouldn't even be in the office. I was on my own. The pharmacy door chimed, and Eleanor walked out, a small white paper bag in her hand. I quickly looked away from her phone, my hands gripping the steering wheel. She got into the car, a pleasant smile on her face. "Sorry about that, dear. Old people and our pills, you know." She didn't seem to notice the phone's screen was still faintly lit. She just dropped it back into her purse. The air in the car was thick with my unspoken terror. I felt like a wild animal that had just realized it was in a cage with a predator. I had to act normal. Any sudden change in my behavior would tip her off. No problem at all, I managed to say, my voice sounding unnaturally high. So, the podiatrist, I said, trying to keep my tone light as I pulled out of the parking lot. Where to next? She gave me an address on the far side of town, in an area I wasn't familiar with. As I typed it into my GPS, a sick feeling of dread washed over me. The destination wasn't a medical building. It was a patch of green on the map labeled Morgan Creek Nature Preserve. Miles of woods, hiking trails, and, I now suspected, precious few people. It says it's a park, Eleanor, I said, my voice trembling slightly. Oh, is it? She said, feigning surprise. Silly me. The doctor must have a new office right on the edge of the preserve. Beautiful views, I imagine. The lie was so blatant, so lazy, she wasn't even trying to make it believable anymore. She knew she had me. We drove in silence for the next 20 minutes. My mind was a whirlwind of frantic escape plans. Could I fake car trouble? Claim I was suddenly sick? Every scenario seemed flimsy, easy for her to see through. I kept glancing at her out of the corner of my eye. She was perfectly calm, her hands folded in her lap, looking out the window at the passing scenery. She was enjoying this. The power she had over me. The GPS told me to turn onto another unpaved road, this one even more remote than the first. A small wooden sign half swallowed by ivy confirmed we were entering the preserve. The address is 2 miles down this road, the automated voice announced. 2 miles. 2 miles of dense woods, no cell service, and no escape. This was it. This was the end game. This was the place she had been preparing me for. My hands were slick with sweat on the wheel. This is where I was going to die. The thought was so clear, so certain, that it almost brought a strange sense of calm. The panic subsided, replaced by a cold, sharp-edged clarity. I wasn't going to be a victim. I wasn't going to be another girl who made a stupid mistake and ended up on the news. I had to fight. You know, Eleanor, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I forgot to tell you. I'm so glad we have this drive today. She turned to look at me, a flicker of curiosity in her cold eyes. Oh, she said. And why is that, dear? My boyfriend, I said, the lie forming on my lips with startling ease. He's a police officer. He was worried about me doing these drives alone, so he insisted on putting a tracker on my car. He also likes to meet me after my last drop-off of the day, just to make sure everything is okay. He's probably waiting for me back near your house right now, but I just sent him a quick text with this address so he knows where to meet me instead. Isn't that sweet of him? I held my breath. It was a desperate, flimsy bluff. But it was all I had. I watched her face. For the first time, I saw a crack in her calm, cruel composure. The smile faltered. A flicker of something uncertainty, maybe even fear passed through her eyes. She stared at me for a long moment, her mind clearly working, calculating. The silence stretched on, broken only by the sound of gravel crunching under the tires. We were getting closer. I could feel it. Just as I thought my bluff had failed, she sighed, a theatrical, disappointed sound. You know what, dear? She said, her voice dripping with false sweetness again. I'm feeling awfully tired all of a sudden. I think I'd just like to go home and lie down. We can reschedule the foot doctor for another day. My heart leaped, but I kept my face a mask of polite concern. The turning point was here. I had a chance, a tiny sliver of a chance, to get out of this alive. But I knew, with chilling certainty, that the drive back to her house would be the most dangerous part of my entire life. Of course, Eleanor, I said, forcing a warm, understanding smile. Whatever you need. We'll get you home. My own voice sounded alien to me, a cheap imitation of the naive, accommodating girl I had been just an hour ago. Inside, my nervous system was screaming. Every muscle was coiled tight, ready to either fight or flee. I needed to turn the car around, but the road was too narrow, flanked by a ditch on one side and a thick wall of trees on the other. I'd have to keep going until I found a place to turn. My bluff had bought me time, but it had also put Eleanor on alert. The game had changed. She knew that I knew. We drove on. The silence was absolute now, a suffocating blanket of mutual suspicion. I kept my eyes locked on the road ahead, but my senses were stretched to their limits, listening for any sound from the passenger seat, watching for any sudden movement in my peripheral vision. I imagined her reaching into her purse, pulling out a weapon. It felt like an eternity, but we eventually came to a small, muddy clearing where a hiking trail began. This was my chance. Here's a good spot to turn around, I announced, keeping my tone breezy. As I began the slow, careful process of a three-point turn, my headlights swept across the entrance to the trail, and my heart stopped. Leaning against a trail marker post half hidden in the deep afternoon shadows was a man. He was tall and broad, just like the figure I'd glimpsed in the woods that first day. He wore a dirty flannel shirt and a baseball cap pulled down low, but I could see a thick, unkempt beard. He was watching us. Waiting. He took a small step forward as my car began to face back the way we came. This was him. This was S. This was Eleanor's son. He was real. My lie about my cop boyfriend was the only thing standing between me and him. Oh, look, dear, Eleanor said, her voice sickeningly sweet. There's my boy. He came all this way to check on me. She was giving me an out, a plausible reason for him to be there. She was testing my story. If I panicked, if I showed any fear, they would know I was lying. I forced a laugh. Wow, what a coincidence, I exclaimed, my voice an octave too high. You should introduce us. I didn't slow down. My foot pressed harder on the accelerator. The Honda's small engine whined in protest as we picked up speed on the gravel road. I glanced in the rear view mirror. The man was running now, chasing the car, his face contorted in a mask of rage. He was surprisingly fast. Eleanor let out a hiss of frustration. Stop the car, Chloe. It wasn't a request. I can't stop here, it's not safe, I said, my eyes glued to the road. Don't you see him? He's chasing us. We need to get help. I was pretending to be a scared but well-meaning bystander caught up in a misunderstanding. I needed her to believe I didn't suspect her. He is my son, she shrieked, the facade completely gone now, her face a terrifying mess of fury and wrinkles. Stop this car right now. She lunged for the steering wheel. Adrenaline, pure and potent, flooded my system. I yanked the wheel to the left, keeping the car on the road, and simultaneously slammed my right elbow back, connecting hard with her shoulder. She let out a cry of pain and surprise, falling back into her seat. In the rearview mirror, her son was getting smaller, a furious figure shaking his fist in a cloud of our dust. We were almost back to the main road. I didn't dare believe I was safe yet. She could have a weapon. She could grab the wheel again. She was rummaging in her purse now, her breath coming in ragged gasps of fury. You stupid little girl, she spat. You ruined everything. I braced myself for a knife, for anything. Instead, she pulled out her phone. My blood froze as I realized what she was doing. She was going to call him, tell him to cut me off somehow. My bluff was about to be called. I saw the paved road ahead, maybe 100 yards away. It was now or never. I stomped on the brake. The car skidded to a halt on the loose gravel, throwing both of us forward against our seatbelts. Before Eleanor could react, I unbuckled, threw my door open, and ran. I didn't look back. I just sprinted, my lungs burning, my legs pumping harder than they ever had before. I burst out of the woods and onto the asphalt of the main road like a creature escaping from the dawn of time. I waved my arms frantically at the first car that came along, a minivan with a family inside. The driver, a man with a horrified look on his face, slammed on his brakes. I wrenched open the passenger side sliding door and practically threw myself inside, babbling hysterically, "Please help me, please, that woman, her son, they tried to kill me." The police were called. I sat in the back of a squad car, wrapped in a scratchy blanket, and told them everything, my voice shaking so hard I could barely form the words. It sounded insane, I knew it did. A sweet old lady luring a volunteer driver into a trap for her son. But the officers listened. They found my car abandoned on the dirt road, the driver's door still hanging open. Eleanor was gone. They searched the Morgan Creek Nature Preserve, but she and her son had vanished. It was like they had melted back into the woods. The investigation that followed was a nightmare. The police discovered that Eleanor Ainsworth didn't exist. The house she lived in was a rental paid for in cash for the last 6 months. The name, the stories, the grandchildren in Oregon, it was all an elaborate fiction. They found evidence that at least 2 other young women from the Helping Wheels program had been assigned to her. Both had quit after only 1 or 2 rides, reporting that the client made them uncomfortable. I was the one who hadn't listened to my gut. I was the one who had tried to be kind. The police think they were a team, drifting from town to town, using the same scam. The why is the part that haunts my nights. Were they traffickers? Was it for ransom? Or was it something worse, something more personal and sadistic? I'll probably never know. They were never caught. I don't volunteer anymore. It's hard for me to trust people now, especially those who seem helpless. My mom was right. My empathy was my greatest vulnerability. That kind face Eleanor saw wasn't a virtue, it was a target. Sometimes, late at night, I think about that final moment in the car. The look of pure, unadulterated hatred on her face when she knew she had lost. It wasn't the face of a sweet old woman. It was the face of a monster. And the scariest part? It's a face I had willingly invited into my car, into my life, all because I wanted to help. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe and give this video a like. We appreciate everyone and can't wait to bring more stories your way.